Hello everybody, I'm JP, and today we're going to be dealing with 5 things that prove there is a God.
Well, okay, you can try, but I do have to point out that literally every single time one of your lot do this type of video, it's always been more like 5 things that I don't really understand. Therefore, God. And I don't know about anyone else, but I don't tend to find that super convincing. I prefer it when proofs people give do things like make sense or are explained properly, instead of being incoherent, nonsensical gibberish. But that might just be me.
Now, I know I've probably triggered some of you already because you can't really prove or disprove there is a God. So let's just say 5 things that point to there is a God.
Well, the fact that you couched people pointing out an obvious point that you apparently knew already as trolls, but then called the video 5 proofs and opened with this being 5 proofs, I'm going to assume that you think it does a whole lot more than just point to God. But even if we accept your obvious Motte and Bailey tactics as fine and dandy, I don't think you're gonna get even as good as pointing to. And it'll be more like vaguely shrugging in a it could be that if you don't want to actually think about it in any way, shape or form kind of way. Either way, I think it's fair to argue against the way you actually framed this instead of the way you're pretending to do to appease the trolls, aka people paying any attention whatsoever.
So as is my modus operandi, I'm going to try to tackle this in about 5 minutes. So here we go.
Wait, this is how you usually do this? My dude, you know there is like almost no claim on the planet that can be successfully argued to the point of proving it in just a few minutes. Nothing substantial anyway. And don't get me wrong, I love it when your lot do that, because that shit is generally extremely easy to argue against, you know, because it's dumb as hell. But if you want to actually convince someone who isn't already an utter cretin, I recommend at least 7 minutes.
Number 1, the human-animal gap. Now, if you haven't noticed, us Homo sapiens, i.e. humans, are far more intelligent than the next animal.
Whoa, making a lot of assumptions there, buddy. First off, acting like there's a difference between humans and animals when humans just are animals. And second, the next what animal? There are plenty of species of animals that have various levels of human-like intelligence. But that also just completely ignores how intelligence works. The problem with this line of reasoning is it assumes the way humans do stuff is the only or somehow objectively the best way, especially given any circumstance. Also, I know plenty of people who are literally dumber than even a particularly stupid dog, so I don't know why you felt the need to make that specific comparison, but oof.
Making us more capable and therefore more dominant than any other animal on this entire planet by a huge margin. So why is that?
I'd say it's because of the strongest element of human intelligence. It's about their collective brain power, not the individuals. Most, if not all of the best ideas humans have ever had are iterative. The thing that makes the things they do so effective is the ability to tell each other the last one and then build a new one from there. It's a big part of how science works.
Now remember, scientists will compare the smartest animals in the world to about a 5-year-old child. And if you haven't noticed, 5-year-old children really aren't that much of a genius.
Oh, that's rich coming from you. And let's just say you left a baby in a room with a specific species and the same kinds of enrichment you might give to that particular set of animals. You are probably going to get a human out of that is more or less as smart as whatever it grew up with. Now, obviously that doesn't quite work the other way round, but we do have plenty of examples of certain apes who fully learn to communicate with human language, possessing problem-solving skills that they might not otherwise have learned. And I think given a few 100,000 years of development, there's no reason to believe that that species couldn't develop a similar level that humans are at now, or even beyond. Again, it's all about learning and iterating, even if it's from another species. Humans just really aren't all that special in that regard, if any.
Now, these intelligent animals on our planet include orangutans, dolphins, African gray parrots, and even octopuses. Octopi.
Oh, come on, man. Everyone knows the plural of octopus is octopiece. You know, like gooses.
But again, why this huge brain gap? The answer that you'll sometimes hear is humans may have eliminated other species that showed early signs of developing high intelligence, preventing a rival from emerging. Yeah, so somehow we were quelling uprisings from other animals on both land and in the ocean.
Well, I'll thank you for bringing up that important argument so I didn't have to. And then, of course, you completely goddamn butcher it. What the hell do you mean uprising? That's not how that would have happened. Humans were not systematically hunting down anyone they thought was too smart. They simply outcompeted them. And in a lot of cases, since they were usually pretty closely related, just, screwed them in many ways, including literally. But none of it would have been intentional on the side of the human race succeeding to the top of the chain. That is idiotic nonsense. And no one who isn't an idiot says that's what happened. Oh, and the ocean thing just fails to understand how niches work. The kind of problem solving land animals and sea creatures rely on simply result in different applications for their levels of intellect. Sea creatures just don't need to be the same as humans. It doesn't give them any less potential.
Remember, this list had dolphins on it. I don't think our ancestors were exactly preventing dolphins from evolving higher intelligence.
No, they didn't, and no one says that they did. Mate, be careful setting fire to all of your straw men. You are liable to burn yourself. And as every 5-year-old should know, fire burny. Shame you never learned that somehow. And speaking of fire, do you not think that the fact that fire is such a fundamental part of human technological development, well, that might have slowed down things that live literally surrounded by water all the time in their development?
So the point is this: human domination fits nicely into the account of the book of Genesis, where man is told to have authority over all living things, i.e. managing, taking care of, etc.
You have it backwards. Humanity developed as the dominant species and then wrote a book, amongst many, about how important they are and how they were supposed to be like that because they have a bad habit of being self-centered dipshits.
So just stop and think and ask yourself, really?
For the love of fakeismo, you first, mate. Just once, please?
Us humans are the only animal that cognitively dominates this planet and the known universe? What are the odds of that?
Depending on what angle you're coming from, I would imagine nigh 100%, because, well, something had to be at the top. Now, what are the odds that it was specifically humans? Who the fuck knows? But that would be an irrelevant number, because ultimately, whatever species ended up sitting there, thinking so highly of itself, well, they're going to come to the same exact conclusion as you. Well, at least the stupid ones will. The ones with at least 3 brain cells might otherwise consider the fact that, again, it could have happened to literally anything. Humans are not that special.
Number 2, death. You who are watching this are going to die.
Sooner would be better than later, no idea why.
Everyone who has ever lived is now dead. So why is there death? Why do we even ask ourselves, why is there death?
Because death happens, humans noticed that. Do you only know about it because someone told you? And considering the last bit was all about how humans are better than animals, it is very, very funny that your next thing is a thing that literally every single animal has in common. And it happens basically because entropy. That's about it. Nothing lasts forever, as far as we can tell.
So does death prove there is a God? Well, no, but it's something to consider. Evolution could have given us long life, or at least a longer life than we have.
You are so freaking stupid that I am convinced you are going to live 1,000 years just to annoy me. Especially considering you brought up an image of a long-lived creature and couldn't put 2 and 2 as to why the slow-moving creature, like a tortoise, and a human who uses multiple, very expensive biological processes to survive, might not live as long as the biotank. And evolution only tends to favor the ability to procreate. There's a reason there are zillions times more mayflies in the world than humans, but they only live for a day. You dunce.
We basically get old because our body can't keep up with the DNA mutations. The shortening of our telomeres, how do you pronounce that? Look at this. Our bodies don't seem to care.
Well, since bodies themselves are completely incapable of actually caring, yeah, duh. And telomeres are more about stopping runaway replication than anything else. Things like cancer. I mean, why do you think that old people are at such higher risk of developing it in its various forms? Well, at least in part because their telomeres stop working properly. In fact, as I understand it, when someone dies of old age, there's a real good chance that they simply died from a tumor they just didn't know they had.
Now, there are scientists who say that death is beneficial because it allows us to pass on our genes, creating mutations that are beneficial for our environment.
Do you not know the difference between sex and death? If humans lived forever, but otherwise had the exact same abilities that they do now, they would still be able to have kids. Now, to be fair, having more space and the need to have extra humans to replace the ones that are then gone is certainly something that encourages that. But yeah, death itself isn't the way humans pass on their genes, you moron.
But wait, what? Evolution knows it's better in the long run? In other words, it doesn't want to preserve you right now, but is thinking of others millions of years from now? This evolution sounds strangely like intelligence. It doesn't sound very atheistic to me.
It doesn't know anything, you idiot. It's a mechanism. It is not making choices or doing decisions. It's simply a thing that happens, and it is the word we have for it. What you are failing to talk about is actually natural selection, which again is still just a mechanism. But again, makes no choices. It's simply a thing we see happen. And it happens not because someone or something is making it happen, but because when a creature can outcompete its peers, it's more likely to breed and pass on its genes. And death isn't being done by evolution. Death just happens, but it allows for the space of new generations to happen, allowing for, that's right, evolution.
Instead, we all know that death sucks, and that points to the existence of a God who tells us that it sucks. Every human being feels this. We want continuance. We want to go on. So whenever you're thinking about death, first stop and ask yourself, why is my material brain even thinking about death?
Backwards again, humans feel like death sucks, so they sought and subsequently invented one or more particular explanations for why it sucks, not the other way round. Of course, fearing death is a perfectly reasonable survival mechanism, with no need for a magical explanation. If you didn't fear death, at least a little, you would make some really stupid decisions, stupider than the one that caused this video. And that's just, wow.
To quote King Solomon, eternity is written in their hearts.
And to quote me, quoting the Bible to prove the Bible, am big dumb.
All right, point number 3, life. So we just went from death and now we're at life. The fact that we even exist is just crazy.
You call it crazy, I call it interesting. Your incredulity towards the fact of existence doesn't automatically mean that you get to say, well then, it must have been spooky boys.
But first, what is life?
Baby, don't hurt me no more. Sorry, had to be done.
By definition, it's the condition of being a self-sustaining, organized system capable of growth, metabolism, response to stimuli, and reproduction. It's more than that, but we'll go with it.
Is it more than that? I mean, maybe, but I have a sneaking suspicion your more than that is again magic did done to do. Whereas life is actually just a category for things that we witness within the universe. Not everything you don't understand is automatically mystical. In fact, I would argue that nothing is. In part because that's about how much you appear to understand about the universe.
So this is just a fancy way of saying it can live by itself, grow by itself, respond by itself, create food into energy by itself, and make babies.
It's not a fancy way of saying it, it's just the way of saying it. If you had to simplify that shit for your audience, I don't know, man. You might need a new audience. Holy crap.
Now, I don't know what you've heard or what you've read, but take this to the bank. We have never, ever created life, nor have we even come close.
Define close. Because there have been some pretty massive steps toward that particular goal. And you know, you don't need to do something to understand how it could work. Humans will never be able to attain self-powered flight, at least not in their current form. But we know that it would take a human flapping its arms at about 100 times a second to achieve that, and then promptly have their arms tear themselves off. But, you know, baby steps.
But let's just say that one day we do create life. What would that prove? It would prove that it takes intelligence to make life. Brilliant.
Ah, the smugness of the idiot who doesn't understand what he's saying or what the scientists are actually trying to demonstrate. They aren't trying to make life, as a rule. They want to know how life might have formed in the wild. And if they can prove that, they would prove how it formed without intelligence. Although clearly they don't need to. I mean, you're alive with no intelligence involved in that. Brilliant.
Anyway, let's stop and think.
Oh, how I wish you could.
Intelligence, us, hasn't been able to make life. But unintelligence, millions of years ago, was able to make it by itself with no outside help?
not just billions of years ago, but with the benefit of not only millions of years, but also an environment that clearly allowed for that to happen and processes that allowed for the formation of life. Now, you could argue that someone made it so those things all happened to be in the same place at the same time. But if it still happened without their direct intervention anyway, then what makes you think they needed to do that? That's kind of the point.
Never mind the other idea that everything we see came from nothing, abiogenesis.
That's not what abiogenesis is, or how it's pronounced, but that's the least of my worries. And the coming from nothing, isn't that your thing? How about stop saying it? Oh, and note, abiogenesis is the life coming from non-life thing, you twonk. Could you please learn how words work before you come to the internet to fail at them?
Or some like to say quantum fluctuation, which is energy, came from absolutely nothing. Well, we'll figure it out someday, some people say. Well, we may. But for now, we have no idea where it came from. And life itself points to a God.
No. You can't just say, because we don't have the answer, God must have do. And life itself points towards nothing but the fact that life exists. You just throw in the God thing because that's what you want the answer to be, with absolutely nothing backing that up.
The number one complaint against God is ironically the number one proof for God. If God is good, why is there pain and suffering in the world?
Because he's either not good or not powerful enough to prevent it. Therefore, his definition from certain groups is logically inconsistent. Also, the moral argument against God is just the main argument against your God, because it's so utterly effective. You have to make up incredibly stupid theodicies to justify why it's so obviously nonsensical.
I actually presented this question to ChatGPT and the problem of suffering and what it assumes. And this is what artificial intelligence had to say to me.
Right, I'm going to skip that because we really don't need to muddy the waters with LLMs. And just let him get right to his point anyway, because it is shit regardless of him using ChatGPT. Hell, it would have been nice if he'd have used the chatbot to make his script less stupid, but I assume that it would have simply told him to stop writing.
Badness is just a human label. Exactly. Bad is only bad if objective morality exists.
Completely contradictory. Badness being a human label is precisely why we know it's subjective. It requires a subject, humans, to know that something bad has happened. If two logs fall on top of each other, no one suffers. But if they fall on a person, suddenly there's an agent able to say, ow, this shit hurts. And in general, things are only bad if they cause suffering, which is again an idea that humans coined. Doesn't mean that someone made and put suffering into the universe. And again, if they did, they're probably a bit of a dick.
The reason we even ask why is there suffering in the world is because we all recognize that the world is messed up. We all intrinsically know it wasn't meant to be this way.
Slow down, numbnuts. Recognizing the existence of suffering and jumping to, we all know it's not meant to be this way, is such a leap that you should enter the frigging Olympics. No, people do not inherently know that the world shouldn't have suffering. The best you're going to get in terms of that is people would like it if it wasn't that way, which is not the same thing.
And then when we open the book of Genesis, we read, it wasn't meant to be this way.
Your ability to get everything backwards is so profound, I'm surprised you're sitting facing the camera. Again, it would be nice if the world had no suffering. Let's write a book where it's supposed to be like that. That makes me feel all warm and fuzzy. Cool, but that doesn't make it true.
He split history in two, BC and AD.
Nope. I'm not even going to let you finish that particular nugget of stupid. People did that, not Jesus. People decided, hey, let's make the thing that we think is super important right now a yardstick for time. But that doesn't make it a fact about reality. The same way Wednesdays don't prove Odin, March doesn't prove the Roman god of war, and 2026 doesn't prove I exist, because it's not actually named after me for some reason. And we really should look into fixing that.